You're listening to the Heal Yourself Radio podcast. Unleash the Doctor Within with your hosts, Dr. Jonathan Chung and Dr. Brian Tew.
Welcome to Heal Yourself Radio. This is Dr. Jonathan Chung, bringing you the best guests on teaching you how to unlock the Doctor Within. And today I'd like to welcome Dr. Scott Mills, a chiropractor with a passion for empowering others. He's definitely a guy that a lot of people are starting to know with his 2-Minute Fix videos. He's currently located in San Francisco with his wife, Diane Sanfilippo. You might know her if you're big into the paleo world with Balance Bites and Practical Paleo. In addition to being a chiropractor, he holds a master's degree in exercise science. He's also a certified athletic trainer in his past experience. So he is a wealth of knowledge. His latest project is called the Full Body Fix, which is a video series where you could teach yourself corrective exercise and other techniques to help treat yourself. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Hey, Doc. Thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate the opportunity.
No problem. Well, another thing that a lot of people might not know is Scott is unofficially one of the top 10 fittest chiropractors in the world from our Chiro Cup competition last year. So we know that Scott is a big CrossFitter. He's a strong dude. How does it feel to be one of the top 10 fittest chiropractors?
Honestly, I didn't know I was up there because that group was super competitive. I kept looking at the standings after every WOD. I was like, I think I'm doing pretty well. And I'd be like totally middle of the pack. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of intense athletes out there that are also chiropractors. That was really cool. I appreciate you running that. For the listeners that might not know, Dr. Chung actually ran kind of a Facebook group for the CrossFit Open. And it was pretty cool to see all the healthy docs all around the country practicing what they preach. And actually, I think a good buddy of mine, Tim Szymanski, aka the WOD Doc, he's out in New Jersey where I just left. I think he was our top winner, wasn't he?
Oh, he was far and away their top winner. No one in our group is fitter than him.
Yeah.
But a lot of people will really underestimate fitness when it comes to choosing their healthcare provider and their healthcare professional. And being one of the fittest chiropractors in a group is actually not a small statement, because chiropractors in general tend to be a very body conscious and fit group of people. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. In fact, the first time I remember feeling this was when I started getting active release technique certified. That group is kind of like a ridiculous fitness freak group of docs. You go to these conferences and you're like, okay, this is a fit group of docs and providers, and that was when I started noticing that for sure.
Awesome. And let's talk about you mentioned active release technique, and that's probably a good place to start. A lot of people have started to hear about active release technique, also called ART, in a lot of circles, especially in the sports arena and the fitness arena. Can you tell us what active release technique is?
Yeah, sure. It's something I got into actually before I went to chiropractic college. One of my buddies who got me into chiropractic was like, I think as an athletic trainer, you'd really benefit from this technique. And I was like, okay, what is it? He told me a little bit about it, and I got interested and started getting certified. This was back in 2005, and I've kept up continuous certification throughout. So it's 10 years now of doing ART. Basically, it's centered around the concept of improving motion and movement and functional movement by removing scar tissue or adhesions that have built up in soft tissue. And so anytime there's an injury, whether it's repetitive, stress, strain, chronic, or acute, the body is always going to respond by trying to protect itself and laying down some scar tissue, some protective tissue. This happens, you can see it when you get cut on the outside of your body, but it also happens internally within soft tissue. And it's good initially because we need that to help heal that injured tissue, but it creates problems on a long-term basis because that scar tissue or adhesion can grab onto adjacent tissue and basically gunk up your movement. It prevents you from moving properly throughout, full ranges of motion, and can even lead to things like nerve entrapments, which ART has really become specialized in at solving these kind of nasty nerve entrapments. Carpal tunnel syndrome, sciatica are some of the more popular ones. But essentially it's all about finding a problem area of scar tissue adhesion, shortening that tissue, contacting it with just your hands. There's no tools involved outside of hand contact, and then lengthening that tissue and breaking up the scar tissue and adhesion. And once that happens, the body kind of recognizes that as foreign, goes in, cleans it up, and we get really, really great results really quickly, which I think is kind of all providers' goals and all patients' goals for sure.
Yeah, no question about it. What are some of the things that you notice it being super effective with? Because myself, whenever I'm struggling with, rotator cuff issues with my right shoulder from playing baseball, I actually see one of my buddies in the area, and he actually goes through ART for my shoulder, and it's done wonders for me as far as weightlifting goes.
That's definitely, in my practice in New Jersey, I treated about, I would say 85% of my patients were athletes, CrossFit and otherwise. And shoulder pain was probably the number one thing I worked on. And kind of have had that, I guess, awareness that it's become a very popular problem, and also something I became really good at solving very quickly. And I do attribute a lot of that to ART and some of the other techniques that I do in conjunction with removing that soft tissue adhesion. And but really anything, John, is anything that there is an issue where there has been scar tissue or adhesion that's formed in soft tissue, ARTs can be really good at. But the nerve entrapment ones that I referenced earlier definitely is one of the bigger ones. If people have been struggling a long time, especially with some of these things that have been diagnosed and sometimes misdiagnosed, we can go in, use some special testing to find where that nerve is actually being entrapped somewhere along the nerve track between, the spine and the extremity, and go in, lock that down, and basically floss the nerve with a contact, and it gets just a super effective release of that adhesion and really quick resolution of symptoms.
Awesome. So I know one of my favorite things that you do is you create these 2-minute fix videos, and for people that are listening, I'll put the link to his videos on the show notes. You use a lot of ART principles when it comes to making these 2-minute fix videos. Is that right?
Yeah, what I tried to do with those initially was just, well, let me back up a little bit. When I was in practice, I started trying to get home care videos into the hands of my patients. And as you know, as a provider, it's not always easy to get your patients to comply with their home exercises.
Sure.
But I found that getting these videos in their hands actually really helped compliance, and ultimately translated into much better and quicker results for them. But I started making videos basically just on the most common sort of exercises and protocols I would want my patients to do at home, and that kind of turned into this 2-minute fix project, which has then since evolved into the full body fix, which we'll talk about later. But yes, you're right. Definitely use a lot of those principles of starting with tissue in a shortened position and then trying to elongate the tissue in a smart manner. Because I think, a lot of us and our patients have become aware that, for example, if you have tight hamstrings, stretching and stretching and stretching those hamstrings doesn't seem to get us anywhere. But if we can do it in a way that works with the body, it becomes a lot more effective. And what I mean by that is, so I'll use something like, contract, relax positioning, or an active isolated stretch technique where we're neurologically inhibiting that muscle to get it to stretch better, to allow it to relax while we're trying to lengthen the muscle.
Got it. And when it comes to, let's just say, a lot of CrossFitters listen to the show. When they're getting prepared to do a workout, there's a lot of debate about whether people should stretch, whether they should not stretch, whether it should be dynamic stretching. What is, in your opinion, is a great warm-up routine to get prepared for activities?
So that's a great question. It's one I get asked a lot. I did answer that in longer form on the 2-minute fix video platform. But just in brief, my general take on warm-ups is that I prefer to stay away from kind of the deep soft tissue work that has sometimes falls under the realm of quote unquote mobility. I think it's better to do, as you mentioned, a dynamic warm up to get the body neurologically ready for activity is my primary goal in a warm up. So what I mean by that is if I go to CrossFit, and right now I have a really nice benefit of going to San Francisco CrossFit, which they do a heavy focus on pre-exercise mobility and dynamic warm-ups, because that's Kelly Starrett's home gym.
Yeah.
But I love spending 10 to 15 minutes just moving the body. So whether it's doing some air squats, doing some lunges, something where I'm moving, but just my body weight, not too intense, getting the body warm and starting to get the neurology upregulated and firing for activity. And then maybe isolating a little something that I may be having a trouble with. Like right now, I have a little bit of an adductor strain on my left hip. So before a workout, after our warm up, I'll go ahead and target that a little bit with some, maybe some stretch band work, some targeted mobility, but kind of laying off the deep soft tissue work, because I think that's better done either after activity or just on a day that you're not going to be lifting heavy weights.
Right. So more like on a rest day or
Correct.
Probably afterwards. Here's something I wanted to ask you about that I think you have great insight on. One of the first things that I actually heard from you was when I read one of Diane's reposts of your articles about innate intelligence, and I thought that was one of my favorite things that you've ever written or even spoken about. And I think it's a concept that needs to be established for people who believe that they could heal themselves, that they could take care of themselves, as a concept that there is an inner intelligence inside of people that's working for them. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, well, you're right. I wrote a 3-part series on that, sort of introducing this concept of innate intelligence to my readers on the blog at drscottymills.com. And you can read all about that. But first, I wanted to say I love what you and Dr. Brian are doing here, trying to raise the awareness of everyone, that essentially our bodies are self-healing, self-regulating organisms, and trying to kind of instill that back into our mindset. Because I don't know if you agree with me on this, but I think the biggest obstacle to health sometimes is between our ears.
Definitely.
Yeah, because ultimately we are capable of self-healing, self-regulating, given physiological parameters, removing interference from that ability to heal and regulate. So yeah, I'm definitely a huge proponent. It's something that I've talked a lot about, that got me really excited, that got me even into chiropractic in the first place, was this concept of getting away from an outside-in mentality to health. I think we've all been raised in Western culture to sort of think, we get sick or ill because of bad luck, bad genes, bad bugs.
Yeah.
And that the solution is always going to be an outside intervention, whether it be medication, surgery, or otherwise. And yet the reality about health is that everything we have to be healthy is already inside us. We just need to give it the proper fuel through proper nutrition, give it the proper movement through physiologically congruent movement, getting away from sort of this environmental disaster we've gotten ourselves into of sitting all day and being very sedentary. And then the third component, which is a balanced nervous system, including positive mental habits. And if we can get those three things in check, sort of Dr. James Chestnut says, eat well, move well, think well. I think that's the easiest way to say it. If we can get those three kind of pillars of health in check, then we're giving our bodies the best chance possible at health. And obviously as chiropractors, we start kind of with that foundational principle of keeping a clear and balanced nervous system to provide the body with the best chance possible.
Absolutely. And one of the things I think people do get a misconception about is this isn't just for like really, simple things like uncomplicated back pain or, a crick in your neck. Like these principles work astonishingly well for people that have long-term chronic health illnesses. In fact, I would probably put these principles up to the test against most other health interventions that are out there, besides some of the just absolute outliers out there.
Right. Absolutely. I think, yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest things I'm sure that you you and I have providers have run into is sort of, kind of reference shifting the mentality. And ultimately, it's about our belief systems about health will direct our decision making about health, right? So if we believe that we don't have control or the ability to control our health, then that's going to send us down one path of sick care, I believe. Or if we believe that we do have everything we need inside of us to be healthy, we just need to provide it with the right fuel and tools, then that's going to direct us down a different path of healthcare. And I think that makes all the difference.
And definitely. So let's get a little bit more into this project that you have coming up, the whole body fix, the full body fix.
Yeah.
So what really inspired you to take it from these 2-minute fixes up into a more comprehensive series?
Well, ultimately, Doc, I just saw a need, I think, in the marketplace for it. And I was receiving tons of great feedback from, folks on my YouTube channel and blog, et cetera, who are just saying, they just are starving and hungry for something that they can do on their own in conjunction with help from professionals. And that's one of the big things I want to focus on with the full body fix is it's not meant to be a standalone program where you never need to see a provider or doctor again. It's meant to be done in conjunction with support as supportive care with, a providing care practitioner of your choice. But I know there's plenty of products out there that, are teaching people to, do home rehab. But what I wanted to do was sort of offer my unique take on it in a very accessible way. And I think that's kind of one of the things I think separates what I'm working on is just the ease of use and accessibility. There's so many good new platforms being developed out there. And in fact, I'm using a brand new sort of beta version of a platform that's working really, really well. And I've got a few people testing it out with sort of what I have already uploaded and getting some really good feedback on just general ease of use. And so the full body fix ultimately is a series of corrective exercises based on the most common conditions that I've seen in practice over the course of 15 years of helping people recover their health. And so for example, you may have low back pain. And there's a million and one activities you could possibly do to help, recover from that low back pain. I've taken what I think are, sort of the 10 best exercises, broken them up into 2 different protocols, a mobility protocol where we're focusing on improving motion of the low back, and then a stability protocol where we're focusing on motor control to stabilize and support that, in this case, lower back. And basically I've taken that and just taken that concept of pairing mobility and stability across the whole sort of constellation of most common complaints, musculoskeletal complaints.
Okay. And where do you think are some of the biggest obstacles that people run into when they're trying to do home exercises and trying to stay compliant with their practitioner's recommendations?
Yeah, ease of access for sure. That was one of the things I started doing was just basically direct emailing my patients these videos, and they were like, "Oh, that's really good. It's like right in my inbox." Making them mobile friendly is super important, which all of these are they look really good on mobile. I've already tested them and really excited about how good they look there. And then also, I think we've sort of gotten in this habit, and I don't want to call out any people in specifically, but there's just so much out there, sort of content overload. And what I wanted to do is really kind of pare it down into the exercises that are the most simple but most effective and that people can do with as little equipment as possible. So I've limited basically all of these you can do with nothing more than, like a foam roller and a stretch band. Like there's really not that much equipment involved, because I think that becomes a big limiting factor when it's like, oh, you need this device for this activity and this one for this one. And next thing you know, you have a full PT set up at home, and you're like, well, wait a minute, why did I just buy all this stuff? I could have just gone to the PT. Trying to do things that are very simple but effective with as minimal requirement from an equipment standpoint as possible.
Yeah, and I think that Tim Ferriss put it best, where he talks about identifying the 20% that's going to be responsible for 80% of your results. And I think
Absolutely.
that's one of the things you do a really good job at with some of the videos that you create. So that's definitely something that I've always admired about some of the content that you put out there.
Thanks. Yeah, and the other thing I want to say, real quick about, before we move on from anything to this, is my other goal for this is to make it healthcare provider friendly as well, because I think, it was something that I was looking for. And I guess that's sort of the entrepreneurial spirit, is when you don't find what you're looking for, you make it. But I want this full body fix to be very easily accessible to providers, to get into their patients' hands at a low cost and no cost to the patient. So I'm sort of working on the specifics of how that's going to work, but basically providers, are going to be able to sign up and have this whole library of videos available to all their patients at no extra cost to the patient. So I'm trying to create sort of a new model, a new way to think about how to do these home care exercises in a higher compliance manner at a lower cost.
Awesome. So now's our time for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So one of the things that, you're essentially married to a best-selling author and one of the biggest health podcasters out there.
True.
How has that impacted your overall view of getting people a complete spectrum of health?
Well, I think it's ultimately the biggest change for me, meeting Diane and kind of going through this sort of different phase of using my expertise in a different manner, has kind of enlightened me in a way where I can sort of see how to get resources into the hands of people in a lot of different ways, because not everybody learns in the same way. Some people, do better when they're reading. Some people do better watching, and some people do better when they're hearing things, right? So that's one of the things that I think Diane does really well with her whole team. They produce a ton of different content for, people in a lot of different avenues in order to sort of reach everybody, that everybody can get something out of it. And that's something I've really appreciated in watching her work and watching her reach so many people. But I think it's definitely been fun too, to kind of pair, sort of this whole idea of improving our movement with the nutrition, the paleo side of things, or paleo-ish side of things. Because ultimately, like, as you know, as a provider, you take care of people who don't necessarily get better. Not everybody gets better under care. And it's not because you're not doing something right. It's because there's another component in their life they haven't addressed yet, whether it's nutrition or positive thought patterns.
Definitely. And, I feel like paleo has always been a very great starting point for people as far as when changing their nutritional habits. Do you have any good insights on how to transition someone that's been perpetually stuck in the standard American diet, and at least getting them into a paleo-ish type template?
Yeah, I think that's the best way to say it too. I think we've moved away from kind of this strict concept of paleo, like all or nothing. I think just, kind of taking some of the biggest heavy hitter offenders out of the diet and then replacing it with nutrient dense additions. I've always been a big fan of diet by addition. So as opposed to starting with restriction and removing everything, start by increasing energy dense, nutrient sufficient food into the diet. And then it's kind of neat to see sort of these unhealthy habits and cravings disappear on their own. So, adding in healthy fats, the healthy fat swap is probably my number one go-to. I have a blog post. I'm new to paleo. Where do I start? I believe is the title on the website. And I talk about this one because I think it's so important. Getting the healthy fat thing right is really helpful to reduce inflammation in a systemic manner, and also provides us with a lot of proper calorie-rich fuel, which I think a lot of times helps curb actually sugar cravings when we're getting more nutrient-dense fats into our body. The other thing would be obviously increasing nutrient-dense dark leafy greens, a variety of colorful vegetables. I think that are pretty often missing in the standard American diet. That included my own until not too many years ago. So yeah, I think that's a good place to start, and then kind of just doing it gradually. I think too many people try to jump right in, but there are different type of personalities where they kind of have to do the abstainer sort of route, where they just go whole hog paleo. And kind of remove all the grains, legumes, sugars, and all that processed food right off the bat. But yeah, the big ones, I think, just kind of hit the big ones, reducing sugar, reducing processed food, swapping out good oils, and getting more vegetables and higher quality meats into the diet. That's kind of the best place to start, and then sort of adjust it as needed. Like for me, I eat white rice on a regular basis, which is technically not in the paleo diet, quote unquote. But for me, I do better with it based on my energy expenditure throughout my day.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me about white rice. That's
I'm sure.
that's an important staple of my diet that I intend to keep around, even if I take breaks from it here and there.
Yeah. And that's the big thing. Like Diana and I were talking about this recently. I think ultimately our bodies love to try to adapt to different situations. We're born into this world that's kind of very static, but our bodies actually love dynamic, whether it's activity or nutrition, to the ability to try to create a lot of variety in both our diet and our movement actually helps stimulate health, in my opinion, because health at its base is the ability to adapt. You either take a stressor in, adapt to it, and move on in a healthy manner, or you break down and become ill or have a disease. And so I think you hit on a good point there with diet, especially some people, I think, get into a rut of just eating the same thing over and over and over again, which I think can be problematic no matter what kind of food it is.
I'm really glad you brought that point up, because that's something that I've been a big believer in too, is putting the body through these different challenges that forces it to adapt to it.
Definitely.
Because I know we do that when it comes to exercises. That's why I love CrossFit so much, is because it forces you to adapt so many different ways and so many different times with the different movements it puts you through. And even just switching my eating regimen periodically and not staying strict to any specific regimen, I think is good for your body to go through different physiological states.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I like that you brought up the movement side of it too, because even in CrossFit, as variable as the intensity and load and movement requirements are, I find that even just adding things like tennis or a nice long jog or a mountain bike or snowboard or golf, anything that's kind of outside of the lifting weights, I think adding that stuff in, the functional full body sport movement, is a great companion to throw into a CrossFit type routine. So if you do have a lot of CrossFitters listening to the show, and maybe they're feeling like they're in a little bit of a movement rut with their training, I would encourage them to get outside or jump into a sport maybe they used to do, used to love, and try it again. And it's fun because for me, volleyball was a big part of my college and post-college activity, and I took a little bit of a break, and then I went back to it recently, and I've really been enjoying just the variety of movement that getting outside of the CrossFit box has done for me.
Definitely get out there and play.
Yep.
What are your 3 meals that you don't think you would be able to go without?
One of them I had this morning, which was I love Here's another non-paleo food. I love home fries,
Okay.
poached eggs, and sausage. We have a ranch here in Northern California, Prather Ranch, that does these whiskey sausages. Oh my gosh, they're so good. So like just like a big like home style breakfast like that.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, that's and I've learned how to poach eggs really well, Diane. So like we definitely do those a lot. If you're on Instagram at ScottyMillsDC is my handle. You can follow me there and see all my breakfasts.
Yeah, you'll get hungry within a couple minutes there.
That's
So.
right. Another favorite. I'm definitely a steak and sweet potato kind of guy. So it doesn't take much for me to be happy, other than a nice kind of juicy piece of medium rare steak done on the grill. Been really enjoying flap meat. So if you can find that at your local butcher, ask for that. It's kind of like a fattier version of I'm blanking on the other cut. Not flat iron, but flank steak. It's like a little bit fattier than a flank steak. And then just like a nice whipped sweet potato with some cinnamon and ghee. And maybe a little bacon and Brussels sprout side.
That's a hell of a meal you're putting together. Right?
I know. I eat a lot. So and then probably if we're going on the sweeter side, I'm a sucker for like a apple pie type flavor. And of course, it gets a little trickier now with doing gluten-free crusts or grain-free crusts. But we've got a few good ones that we've been doing. And for Thanksgiving, we put together an apple crumble, which is a lot easier. You can just use sort of some ghee and some gluten-free flour and kind of make that topping pretty easily.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So besides, Diane's books and some of your own material, what are some of your favorite resources to give out to people that you think make a bigger impact in their life?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I mentioned him earlier. I think if you're a CrossFitter and you're not following the WOD doc, I would definitely go check him out. He definitely has a bigger focus on, working with CrossFit athletes. But he does, I don't know if he's still doing this, but Dr. Tim Szymanski, he's a chiropractor out in New Jersey, works with a bunch of athletes out there. And he goes by the moniker WOD and does a video a day, or at least he did for a long time. It seems like he's still putting them out. Really awesome dude. Really had a really nice time being able to hang out with him a couple times and shoot some videos with him. But I would check him out. I always have to give shout out to the Primal Palate. So Bill and Haley at primalpalate.com. They're a couple in Pittsburgh that I first met when I had my first practice. I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and they actually introduced me to Diane because they had helped her shoot Practical Paleo. They're an awesome resource for just kind of taking the fun back into paleo as far as from a food standpoint. You can just see it in their blog posts. In fact, today I was researching their Harvest Mule recipe. So if you like Moscow mules, it's a cocktail that I'm going to be making for some friends coming up here in a couple weekends. But yeah, they just have a great time making great food. And then let's see, that's a movement. That's a nutrition. Let me give you one more. Well, I'll point people back to kind of to where we started, which was I get asked all the time, how to find a provider in my area that does kind of the same stuff that I do. I usually point people to activerelease.com, and you can do a location-based provider search there. You can throw your zip code in, and then it'll show you everybody who's certified in your area. So activerelease.com is definitely a good provider location place to start.
Great stuff. And people will be able to find those links and resources in the show notes here. Do you have any last words of wisdom for people before we sign off here, Scott?
Last words of wisdom. No, I think, like I said, somewhere in the middle of our conversation is if I could leave, something with your listeners, it would just be to really, start assessing your mindset around health in general, and just kind of do little check-ins with yourself. Are you coming from a place that is constantly focusing on trying to correct health from the outside in, or more appropriately, are you focusing on doing everything you can possible to improve your health from the inside out, through movement, nutrition, thought? I think that's it. That's my focus. That's what I've dedicated my professional career to, and I think it's awesome what you guys are doing here on the podcast, giving providers like us a platform to talk more about it, and how and also equipping people with tools to do that. And so, yeah, if anybody wants to learn more about my work, you can check me out at drscottamills.com. Fullbodyfix.com will take you also to that new project.
Awesome. It's been great having you on the show, Scott. So for our listeners, if you want to follow him, I'm going to have the links to his Instagram, his Twitter. Definitely check out drscottamills.com, especially if you've been having some of these nagging problems with shoulder pain, carpal tunnel, sciatica, low back pain, headaches. So much great stuff there where you could actually take advantage of it and heal yourself. And then when you need a provider to guide you a little bit further along the way, then go out and find one, because that's what we're here for, is to help you when things get more complex, but you should have the ability to heal yourself.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Heal Yourself Radio. If you like what you hear, show us some love on iTunes by writing a review or by sharing with your friends. We love interacting with our listeners. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/healyourselfradio. You can find me on Twitter at Dr. Jonathan Chung. And you can always come to our website at healyourselfradio.com and interacting with us in the comments section. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next week.